Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Super Coach Mates. Well, round three done and dusted, and finally we have the full three of us back together after a few rough weeks with some general soreness from myself, and I think Jonas has missed a couple as well. Um, so we're just going to quickly do our weekly review podcast. So, whilst our Supercoach side specifically aren't doing too well. It's glad to see that both of our wheel sides are actually doing extremely well and they currently occupy the top two spots on the ladder. So just thought I'd give a shout out to our sides because we're loving the form, so keep it up. So tonight I've got both Thomas and Jonas here. So the first one, so this is going to be our versus segment. So the first one is which one of these points of difference or pod would be worth bringing in. So obviously we've got Jaden Hunt, who scored 98 points for a injury depleted West Coast, or we've got Luke Ryan who scored 105. I'll throw this one to you, Jonas. Who are you bringing out of these two if you had to pick one, and just maybe a quick reason why?
Well, it really depends on whether you're looking for a cheap option or a more expensive one. The Hunt one I don't mind because some of the other cheap options that sort of people were looking at last week, like your Bows and Crozier, didn't really set the world on fire. And Hunt's got the security, but what sort of deters me from picking Hunt is he's already had a price rise, so he is a bit more expensive. Whereas Ryan's um, scored quite well last few weeks and is fairly priced. So if you're looking for a premium, I'd be considering Ryan, but in saying that, there's some other good options on the horizon line, like Tom Stewart perhaps next week with that 9-10 in his break even. So for that reason, I'd be going Hunt because there aren't many options around his price that you'd like the look of. Whereas with Ryan, there are other options you can go for either this week or in weeks following.
Yep. Thomas, are you the same here?
Yeah, I'd go Hunt. Jonas nailed it on the head with regards to Tom Stewart coming back in. He went berserk against the Gold Coast, and he has a habit of doing that after coming back from an injury. So if you think about it, he's pretty much one spot you want to lock up after having such a shit score. And once that's price is out of the cycle, he's right for the picking, regardless of whether he goes lower than 100 in a couple games. Hunt's one I'm looking at personally with regards to Finn Callaghan moving out. I've liked what I've seen. I obviously paid a pretty close attention to the derby on Sunday, and he's one that they like the ball in his hands a lot just because he runs and breaks the game open by cutting through the defensive line a fair bit. And he's got pretty effective kicking inside 50 as well. He doesn't blaze away at it. He's pretty accurate with pinpointing targets inside 50. My only concern with Hunt is the fact that, obviously I'm not concerned that he'll not play because West Coast are decimated, I think, in the next coming weeks. He'll play regardless, but whether or not, we get that run and carry, West Coast obviously did quite well against Freo, and they came back as well quite heavily. So it's whether or not that when they come up against teams that will pump him, whether or not he gets that freedom to run through. There's enough ball back there, but it's whether or not he'll get his style of gameplay going. So it's an interesting one, but out of the two, I'd take in someone like Hunt. I don't think his price, I've just got it open here. He only rose 40k.
40K.
Had no shit score at the start. Well, I wouldn't say shit score, but 56, then went close to 2 tons, 98. So he's got form. I think the ball will get enough in his hands to score decently well. And at 320k, there's not too many other options, as Jonas mentioned, that could rival him at that price point. So yeah, I'd say Hunt quite comfortably, because I know that Ryan has had issues of this last year where he went on tears and absolutely shut the bed when other key defenders went down around him. And it's only because Freo have had a full complement of key defenders at the moment that he's scoring so well. So I'd say Hunt by a fair stretch, I think.
Yeah, I'm gonna support them, but I will put a caveat on Luke Ryan and say that I think he's a big beneficiary of this fake football that Fremantle are playing with this chip mark around the back line. I think if they persist with that model, which it looks like they might not, given what happened in the derby, but he was the biggest beneficiary of that fake football because he was just getting marks for days, and obviously he's a strong high meters gained player. So I think if they go more direct, which some people have been crying out for, I think his scoring potential might be lower. And I think Jaden Hunt, you've basically got a free crack at him at that price. I think if he does well, then you keep him. If he doesn't, well then you can make 40k off him this week and then go to Tom Stewart next week, and I don't think anyone would be complaining about that. So yeah, I think Hunt's definitely my option. The next one is which one of these mids would be worth getting in? So Josh Kelly, Patrick Cripps. So obviously Cripps had the 42 disposals, but only 112 points. Whereas Josh Kelly had less disposals, but got 150 or 148 points. So I'm going to throw this one to you, Thomas, because I think Jonas is going to give us biased answer. So you'll be probably the most non-biased out of the two of you. So who are you picking for this one and why?
As much as I don't like to say this because I know how much of a hospital case he can be, Josh Kelly, I think I wouldn't say close to a must-have because of his injury history and how quick he can get injured, but I think they've realised how effective he is in the midfield. The most impressive thing I've seen out of that score was he got 9 tackles as well, so he's laying the pressure on. I don't know if he's bulked up a little bit, considering that he knows that he's going to play pure mid. But there's none of this bullshit where he's copped a half forward or a wing role. Yeah, they've shot him straight in the guts, and I mean, they were close to beating Carlton on the weekend, and he was a big reason why. The bloke loves to kick as well. Just bringing up the stats here. Yeah, well, it was almost an even, like 60-40%, but he prefers to kick 18 kicks, 12 handballs. But really, 30 disposals for a close to 150 Supercoach game is pretty ridiculous. In comparison, say, Cripps, having said he got 42 disposals, but 7 clangers, so still, not the best output. But yeah, I'd say Kelly. It's just, the caveat is that he's so injury prone that at some point he's going down. It's just whether or not you're willing to burn a trade to essentially swap him if he goes out for 3 to 4 weeks. But what are your thoughts, Jonas, on those two?
I'd probably go Kelly as well because his role is a bit nicer in the sense that he covers a lot of the ground. He gets a lot of uncontested marks from just moving into the back line, as I say, just whereas Cripps, he had 42 touches and couldn't even crack 115. I don't know, that seems a bit concerning. Sort of has the Doherty champion data lack of love. Plus, I think when Walsh, Kennedy, and Hewitt play full-time mid, that might lead to Cripps spending a bit more time up forward, or at least not burdering as much of the midfield load, which will probably see him regress a bit. So I like the upside of Kelly.
Yeah, well, I think these two are sort of differing players, but yeah, I think I'd prefer to have Kelly. I think he's a bit more damaging with his disposal. I don't think he needs as much of the ball as what Patrick Cripps does to score the same amount of points. And I think the way the Giants are trying to play with this wave tsunami, the tsunami as they call it up there, I think that suits him to an absolute T. But I think you will have to keep a trade up your sleeve if you do go down that path, because he is a walking hospital bed, unfortunately. But yeah, I think I would be leaning towards Kelly out of the two. But I still will say I still think Patrick Cripps is a good buy, but just for this specific pairing, I would be picking Josh Kelly. Moving on, so Jordan De Goey, 122 points from 35 disposals. I thought he was the best player on the ground. And then Liam Baker, who I thought was Richmond's best player on the ground on Friday night. So 143 points from 32 disposals. So obviously there's a discrepancy here with position. So obviously De Goey is a midfield only. And I believe Baker's a forward defender. So there's a bit of a, I guess, needs based for this one, but I'll throw to you, Thomas, because Jonas, I think, might be biased in his opinion on this one, given that he's a Collingwood supporter. So, Thomas, who are you picking out of these two, and why?
Yeah, didn't realise Baker was a forward defender, actually. That's changed my mind completely on what I was going to say. Yeah, I thought it was defender only. I don't know why it was forward defender. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm going to let Jonas and Nathan talk about De Goey a little bit more. But out of the two, I'm going to put it this way. Baker, just because you're using up a mid spot for De Goey. Obviously, if De Goey was forward mid 110%, I'd say De Goey. I think he's more consistent. I think he's definitely ramped up his game to the next level. As you can see on the slide there, 3 behinds could well have been 3 goals, and that's a 150-point game easily in the bank. However, he's a bit more susceptible to, say, an 80 or a 90, which I guess if you take that mid spot away and bring a premium in, you're lacking, or you're basically mitigating the fact that you're losing out 40 points technically or hypothetically speaking on that. Whereas Baker's a forward spot, so there's less risk involved by dumping him, and having a 143 score such as himself on that night is a huge plus, considering that, you know, with forwards you're a little bit more nicer in the fact that you're not as strict, you're not as disappointed if they don't score 100. I think, you know, if say Rosie scores a 90, you don't frown your face too much on it because he's a forward. So, you know, when you're looking on averages for forwards, I think he's one that could be quite effective. He's playing a pretty effective role down at the Tigers alongside Riol, and I think they like him off halfback. He's an excellent distributor, and one that, yeah, is more or less likely to flip into the forward line now just because of how effective he's been. But what are your thoughts, Jonas, on this? And obviously, what are your thoughts on De Goey in particular as a Pies fan?
I think at this stage, it's a bit risky and almost pointless to pick these sort of options because they're not top 8 and you've missed out on their good scoring and their price cycle. And at this stage, you're either bringing in players who are going to be top of their line, or you're saving money, bringing in cash cows and looking for ways to upgrade your team. And neither of these two are going to be in your final team because they're not top of their line. So it's one of those things where you're almost point chasing. So I wouldn't be going either. Whereas someone like a Luke Ryan has the ability to be top 6. But if I had to choose one, I'd be going to De Goey because he's a king and he has the ability to potentially finish top 8 based on how he's scoring so far. But I think there will be games where he scores your 70s and whatnot and doesn't rack it up as much because he is more of an offensive player, doesn't take very many tackles or many sort of defensive acts, which will hurt his scoring a bit. So for that reason, I'd be going neither, but I think De Goey outscores Baker in the long run.
Before Nathan chips in about De Goey, obviously I'm going to put it to you, mainly because I'm thinking of it myself. So obviously De Goey, fair enough, he's probably not going to be top 8 to 10 unless he goes on a tear for the next 10 weeks and consistently scores your 120s, because all you need is a midfielder who can score 110 consistently. But someone like Baker, I'm just going to put it to you, either of you can chip in, I guess, is obviously you've got Dunkley, Dylan Moore, who's the one that scored quite nicely, Rosie, Taranto, Goulden. Say most people have got the 4 sorted. You got Sheasley, who's basically scoring better than most Prims at the moment, so you keep him on the field almost. You could argue that he's better than the top 6 at the moment. So that leaves you at realistically 2 spots online. Cornelia had a shocker at 58. I'm not exactly sure why. We can speak about that later on in the podcast. You've got Dylan Moore, who's, I would argue, in the same boat as Baker with regards to hot and cold sort of stuff. Jeremy Cameron, I mean, key forward, different story. Butters has been beyond shocking. Heaney's a disaster waiting to happen. Darcy Cameron's out for ages. Then you got Charlie Dixon, Tom Lynch, Dusty Martin, who didn't play, end up. Charlie Curnow, Pat Lipinski's injured. Sam Reid is somehow 470k. And then Baker. After that, you're really not looking at anyone else. I've just listed pretty much top 10 price there. What are your thoughts on, say, if you were looking to bring in like a Baker or, I don't know, Jeremy Cameron, for example, that you want to go a little bit different in the forward line and you're banking on the fact that they may end up top 8 to 10 based on X, Y, Z reason? What are your thoughts there when you're looking at other players who you've penciled in preseason that are top 6 that are prone to those stinkers as well, as we saw with Cornelio, for example, with that 58?
I think it's a risky one because you've also got to consider those players who might become DPP eligible in round 6, for instance. Maybe a Sean Darcy or a Jack McRae or something like that. And if that happens, then you've already committed to picking your 6 forwards.
Yeah.
That will leave you in a bit of a bind because you're not going to have much space. On top of that, there are a lot of decent rookies that you want to be fielding in the forward line at the moment, like your Chandlers and your Sheasels, as well as if you've got a few mid prices like Zeeble, for instance, in there. It's going to make it hard to pick Baker now if you've already got some of those Gouldens, Dunkleys, Tarantos, and Rosies. So it's one where if your structure allows it, and it means you're taking, say, a Fergus Green or an Alan Davey off the field, and you really like Liam Baker, then go for it. But I don't think there'll be many teams in that sort of boat.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah, so obviously I already have the goalie, so I've enjoyed his scoring. So I just had a look. He's currently the 10th ranked midfielder, which I don't think is too bad for someone who was at 469k at the start of the year. But I think this is going to clearly come down to what you plan on doing with Liam Baker. I think if you're picking Baker as a forward, I think I would have slight leanings towards Baker, given that I'm not sure what the options are going to be down in the forward line in terms of the big premiums at the end of the year. But if you're planning on using Baker as a defender, I would definitely be going to goalie out of the two. So, I think the goalie, there's some footage going around. The goalie is pretty much playing the Dustin Martin role from 2017. He's basically been given the license to not defend and have a midfielder push up from the half forward line, whether it be Crisp or Taylor Adams or Tom Mitchell, to basically go in there and allow the goalie to be that front half player. So I'm less concerned about drop-offs in the goalie scoring because I think they're still going to look for him. I still think they're going to feed the ball to him. And he's got a brilliant kick on him. I don't think the goalie will be top 10. So if you're picking him now, I probably wouldn't be doing it. But because I've already got him, it's a different story because I can enjoy his scoring. And if he goes gangbusters, well, I'm one up on everyone else. So, yeah, I think it's this particular one is dependent on what you plan on using Liam Baker as. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, it just depends on.
Yeah.
I guess we can go on and on about it, but to keep it short and sweet.
But I will say, though, I would, in my first hunch with this is to agree with Jonas and go, I don't think you should be picking both of them because, as Jonas rightly points out, there will be DPP options coming out after round 6. And if you commit to Liam Baker now and he gets flung into the midfield as a fixed option and he comes out with a 70, well, you're gonna kill yourself. Like you're gonna regret doing that. So yeah, I think these are both stay away players. But I could see more long term upside in Degoe than I can Baker.
It's more so you're willing to keep him long term, and
Yeah.
if you rate a trade as a kind of, all right, Baker's going to be a filler for now, and if something good comes my way, do I just flick him on? Because he's going to make money regardless. With
Yeah.
a huge 140, 118 beforehand, and not a shocking score up before that, like a 60 odd. So yeah, he's going to make money, and it's whether or not you go, all right, do I rate a trade? Worst comes to worst, I can flip him on to someone else pretty easily. But yeah, it's one that you got to weigh up team specific.
Yeah, and I guess if you're in one of the positions like I am, where you're lucky enough to have one of these two players, well, you can just sit back and enjoy the ride that they have because you've already got them. So you don't have to go out of your way to get them if they do go gangbusters in the second half of the year. So the next one, so Sean Darcy and Tim English. So these are two players that I myself personally flirted with all preseason on who to put in, and in the end I went with Darcy. So I might throw this one to you, Jonas. Which way are you leaning towards for these two?
Tim English is the only player to have scored above 120 in each of the three rounds this year. So I like that scoring ability. And to be honest, whilst Darcy scored fine, he was literally playing against nobody. And not only that, West Coast as a team were depleted. And so the fact he only went 132, I think that's a pretty average score given everything that's happened. So I'll still be comfortable moving him on. If you want to hold on to him, that's fine as well. But yeah, I think it's still the right probably call to trade him because he's got a pretty tough fixture coming up. I checked before. He's got some difficult matchups. I know Wits is one of them. And
Riley O'Brien this week.
Yeah, so he's going to have, in theory, a pretty difficult time. Whereas English is just scoring at will at the moment. And the way I'm going this year, like, if English gets injured, he gets injured, and it's like whatever. Whereas if he goes big, maybe I can soar up the ranks a bit. So I'm happy to sort of try English and hope he doesn't cop any long-term injuries. And to be fair, Darcy is also a bit injury prone. So if you're concerned about going from Darcy to English because of durability, I wouldn't make that much of a concern. I'd rather than be looking at going Wits if you want to play it safe in terms of getting someone who's going to play week in, week out. But no, I think English, his ceiling is unreal. So he's one I'm interested in.
Yeah, so obviously if you were to go Darcy to English, so Darcy's 538, and I just had a look at English, then he's 616, so you'd need about 80k. So Thomas, which camp are you in here?
It's a tough one. I'm in this boat as well. As much as I hate to see it, English is just dominating week in, week out. They play the Tigers this week, which will be interesting because I could see him doing very, very well. They do play the Tigers, right? Yeah, play the Tigers. Yeah, I thought that, D-Cam or Darcy Cameron would have done really well, really poorly actually against Nank, who's quite good at mitigating those ruckmen that can run around a fair bit. But yeah, Darcy Cameron almost turned up by 3/4 time. So I could see a very similar prospective score from English coming up soon. And Darcy's one that, a lot of people just kept because he was going to play a ruckless West Coast, which he, was kind of flipping between whether you trade him or not. And I was in the, you and myself were in the trading, the holding camp because of his potential score. And I guess he paid out pretty well. Was on track for a double ton at one point, but yeah, you take a 132 any day of the week, considering how poorly he's gone. So yeah, it's a tough one. 70k is a fair bit of money to get just a bump up in score or potential score. You don't know if this might kickstart Darcy's run. Definitely when I watched, I don't know what you think about it, Nathan, but when I watched that West Coast Freo game, whenever Darcy was in the ruck, they just looked a lot stronger. He dominated clearances. He was so effective with his hit outs to advantage. Jackson looked more mobile per se and more aggressive in the tackle pressure and all that, but just didn't. They lacked the clearances with him. Whereas he was literally feeding it down midfielders' throats, which was very effective. And they play Adelaide as well. O'Brien's not the best ruckman going around. He's aging up a fair bit. So yeah, it's a tough one. I wouldn't complain if you're in the boat of trading him to an English, but I think English is, yeah, close to a must-have at this point, which is frustrating because I was interchanging Wits and English pre-season and didn't have any intention of bringing Darcy in until Sam Flanders popped along and was a pre-season trap. So if I stuck with Chandler and English, I would have been much happier going into the season, I think.
Yeah, well, I think if you're going to do the Darcy to English trade, I think this is the week that you have to do it.
Yeah.
I think if you wait this long, I think if you wait till next week, I think you've probably missed the boat on Darcy. I mean, on English, sorry. So, look, for mine, I think I'm just going to persist with Darcy and hope that Longmuir just keeps playing him in the ruck. Because, yeah, when he played in the ruck, Fremantle's midfield just looks so much better with him in the ruck.
Yeah.
He was able to use his big frame and just, knock the ball wherever he wanted, basically. So, yeah, so I think, though, the only question mark I have over the both of them is that they are walking hospitals.
Yeah.
So, I guess there's a bit of risk in that because I was actually going to trade out Darcy last week and bring in Darcy Cameron, which would have been a disaster if I had have gone down that path. So look, I think with these big players, I think you've almost got to keep them. You've picked them, unless they get injured or they drastically, 132. I mean, you'll take that. So, yeah, I think unless your side's absolutely dead perfect, you've got the right rookies. You've got, I would have said Mason Wood, but he's now out. You've got Setterfield, you've got, Oliver, all of those guys. Then perhaps I would look at doing that trade. But I think with the state that my side in particular is in, I'm not sure if you're the same, Thomas. I just don't think at this stage of the season I can afford to be wasting a trade getting rid of a Darcy who's, fit and firing and go to English and hope that I'm banking 20 extra points a week. I just don't think that that's the right time of the year to be doing it.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's fair enough. It's a tough one.
Anyway,
Yeah.
moving on. So Sam Powell Pepper and Josh Shelley. So obviously SPP's got 93 points from 15 disposals and 3 goals. And Rochelli's got 95 points from 18 disposals. These are a bit interesting. I think we might have. I'll be interested to see who you're picking out of these two because I know which way I'm leaning towards. So I'll be interested to hear what you have to think about this particular points of difference, Thomas.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you the reason why I put SPP in there. Sam Powell-Pepper was interesting when I saw him play. Looked very effective. He has not scored below 85, so he's gone 97, 89, 93. He's just gone bang, bang, bang. I don't know his possession stats. Let me just bring it up quickly. Obviously, he had the 3 goals and was quite dominant.
He has 15.
Yeah, not many disposals, but it was just real effective around the ball. The round beforehand was, just bring it up, 21 disposals, 4 tackles, no goals, 89. And then the round before that, 97 for 21 disposals, 1 goal, 2. So very, very similar output. I just have my doubts with how Port are going in general and where he's playing. I just think that he's going to get bumped out of that midfield and get pushed more and more forward. I think they'll need the Rosie and Butters to come back into the midfield. I think they just look way. I've always said this with Port. They just look way one-dimensional when Rosie and Butters are not there. With the likes of Wines, Horn-Francis. I know they picked up Horn-Francis and whatnot, but having, Powell Pepper, Wines, Horn-Francis, Drew, they just look way too sluggish in there. They've got no speed whatsoever. So maybe Powell Pepper gets pushed out of there, but he's scoring well at the moment. The one I like is Rochelle. He's one that has got huge X factor. Obviously was a rookie last year. And just gone from strength to strength, really. He plays that high half forward role to a T. And he's priced now at 330, was now before 287, and he's gone pretty big in, close to blowing up in a lot of games. Went huge round one, had a offish game round two, but still scored pretty well. He's just in the link of the chain pretty much in every forward transition, just pushes up high, gets the ball, moves it forward, and is always a goal kicking threat. We know how good he is. We know how dominant he was. It's almost like Rankin helps a little bit because he's now not the main kind of key forward there, or not key forward, key small forward there. Rankin's now that player, so it frees up Rochelle a little bit to push up the ground and utilises his effectiveness of disposal quite efficiently. So what are your thoughts, Nathan, on those two?
Well,
is it worth, before you go, is it worth anyone actually bringing in out of those two as a point of difference?
Well, I was actually hoping you'd say Sam Powell Pepper so we could have a difference of opinion. Because when I first saw these two come up in the in our pre sort of meeting that we have, I'm like, this is going to be Josh Rochelle all the way, and I was hoping you'd say SPP so we could have a difference. But no, look, I am Josh Rochelle all the way in this particular matchup. So I'm just going to put it out there. I think that the showdown is the best game of the home and away season outside of Anzac Day. And unless my own side are playing, so it being Collingwood, this game is one that I will go out of my way to watch. I wish that they put it on the marquee Friday night slot and put it into Melbourne, because I think people need to actually watch this game and see how brutal it is and how how much passion both sets of supporters have for this particular game. I mean, this rivalry literally splits the city in half, and for the winner, you get bragging rights until you play for the next time, and the loser, it's basically lights out for the week. You basically don't want to be anywhere near the winning team's supporters for the week afterwards, because you will cop it. But I'm going to lean towards Rochelle quite massively in this one, actually. So Rochelle, he's cheaper. I think his role in the Adelaide side now is he's almost playing like a young Dustin Martin, the goalie role, in that they're using him as that centre half player.
Yeah.
And I think with his kicking, I think him and Rankin can present tremendous problems down the line. So for me, I think Rochelle has way more upside than Sam Powell Pepper, because at least Rochelle is getting centre bounce attendances. In fact, he attended 18 centre bounces, which only Laird and Dawson attended more than Rochelle, whereas Powell Pepper had 4. So I think the scoring's there for Rochelle. He's younger. I would say he's probably fitter as well, given that he's younger. And I think Adelaide are really going places, in particular their front half. I think I saw on the first crack last night on Fox Footy, or Sunday night, that I think they've got like 5 front half players who are all top 15 draft picks. So they're building a really good front half. And this guy, I think, if he can go in the midfield, might be the cream on the cake that can just steer Adelaide through this next sort of decade and, put bums on seats at Adelaide Oval. So, I think I'm massively in the Rochelle camp on this one.
Yeah.
I didn't realise how cheap he was. If he keeps going like this, I might have to consider him.
Yeah, he's on my radar at the moment.
Yeah.
Sure.
So keep versus trade. So obviously, these two premium players have big break evens. So Cornelio, keep or trade Cornelio here, Thomas.
Yeah. Well, obviously, we've hit our overrated underrated section now. I think trading on a Primo with a big break even, probably, yeah, it's a tough one. I'd just say slightly overrated. I'd be interested to hear what you think, Nathan. Yeah, obviously you bring him in for a reason, but you cannot expect these players to pump out hundreds each week. It's impossible. Very few players are capable of doing so. It's just long seasons, grueling season. There's no way in hell you could expect any player to pump up 100. So there's going to be fluctuations in price all the time. And if you keep trying to justify yourself by trading out a player after one shit game, you're going to run out of trades within 5 days. So, yeah, definitely keep. There's a reason why he brought these two in. Well, I'm talking Doherty and Cornelio in particular. We've seen how good they can be. I mean, Doherty, as I said, I'm a bit filthy on that, got robbed by champion data with 36 disposals. So, yeah, he's one. They're both that I would keep 100%. I don't see a world in where you trade them unless they're injured for a while. It's not like they had three. If there was 350s in a row, that's a big concern, but they both turned up twice, at least or close to turning up twice in 2 out of the 3 games. But what are your thoughts, Jason, on that?
Yeah, well, I'm just gonna refer back to what I said with Sean Darcy to Tim English before. I said you've picked these guys. You've done your research through the preseason, and these are the guys who you've linked on. So unless they get injured, you've just got to back them in until you basically get rid of all your rookies. Cornelio's break even is 152, and he scored 143 in round 1. So, I mean, if you're going to trade out a guy who's going to potentially get within 9 points of his break even off one bad score, I think that's a luxury trade. The one I do have a couple of question marks over Doherty. I know he got robbed on the weekend, which obviously doesn't help because I have him, but I'm just a little bit worried about the role that he's playing. He seems to be sort of playing a quarterback role, which you would think would be a high score, but he just doesn't seem to be translating his disposals into scoring.
Yeah.
So, look, I think I'm going to keep him for the meantime, and I'm hoping that once Carlton gets some of these midfielders back, that he can go back to his normal self. But I think even though he wasn't there most of last year, I think we shouldn't underestimate how big a loss Zach Williams has been for his role in particular. Because towards the back end of last year, I mean, there was talk of him pushing up through the midfield, which I think now that Zach Williams is no longer there, well, for this year anyway.
Yeah.
I think he's had a bit of a sudden role change on the eve of the season, which obviously can disrupt a player. It can disrupt his, mentality and rhythm and whatnot. So, look, I'm going to back in Doherty, but I am a little bit concerned with his role. Obviously, if he comes down and gets a 120, then you take that. But yeah, I just have a couple of question marks over his role, just from what I've seen so far of him. But he's definitely not leaving my side. I'll put it that way.
No, me neither, 100%.
What about these two? So obviously we've got Sean Darcy on here again. I think we've had enough said about Sean Darcy. And forgive me, who's the guy on the right?
Ridley.
Oh, right, Jordan Ridley. Okay, so Essendon are playing. Essendon are playing GWS this week. So obviously these two players, I guess, bring into the discussion of do you trade out with a good score, even if you think they're going to come up against a bad opposition potentially for them. So Where are you sitting with these two for this specific question here, Thomas?
I think it's a pretty overrated statement. Actually, I don't know. I'd say 50-50, maybe even more slightly underrated the more I think about it. Yeah, let's go underrated. I think there's a fine line between, these premium players and then your mid prices that you're trying to pick for a couple of weeks or trying to get on a good run. Darcy and Ridley, I'm talking about, obviously, this just gone week had very good matchups. So you got Darcy at a ruckless West Coast and Ridley who had St Kilda, who, as we all know now, whilst we're still on top of the ladder, mind you, don't have a forward line. So that just shows how well we're going. But Ridley, I obviously went to the game and watched it quite closely. Yeah, Ridley intercepted like crazy, but also had some shocking disposals in some tight moments that cost them direct turnover goals. So, yeah, as I said, that's the reason why he didn't score quite as highly, but still basically turned up. I believe he had, let me just load it up quickly. He had, 7 clangers. So, could have been a huge score. So, yeah, so if you talk about these two players in isolation, Ridley's one that I think I'm looking at one more week to see how he goes in that. It's very clear now that you've got D'Ambrosio, Redmond, McGrath as your running quarterback halfbacks, and you've got Ridley and whoever else, which is Laverde at the moment, because I think Zerk Thatcher went down injured, as your two keys, which Ridley, granted, does better in that halfback role as a loose player, but still, because he is a second key forward, he's still going to get opportunities to intercept mark. And I can see why his score goes off a cliff against a tough forward line. But I just want to see how it goes with him. He's lost kickouts. Redmond's taken 90% of kickouts, so it is frustrating. But I think I've got more things to worry about than Ridley, I think, at the moment, where he's capable of scoring big purely based on intercept. And he does play that goalkeeper role when not defending 1-on-1. So what I mean by that is that he's kind of that last man in defence, and I'll pass it to him quite often as a link in the chain. He's still a ridiculously good kick. They probably could utilise him a little bit better, but that's just how I see it at the moment. Darcy's one that, there were huge concerns going into the West Coast game. It was a riskier pick in the fact that, yes, he's going to verse a BJ Williams and a shit West Coast ruck line. But, there were rumours flying around that he was looking at the outer of the club and he's already looking at other clubs, etc., etc. Who knows why he scored so poorly against North Melbourne, why they were dumping him in the forward line when he's clearly the more capable ruckman tap-out-wise. But I think that if you believe strongly that they're going to score shit because, they're only going to score well that week because of a team-specific role, and they go back onto the average scores, I'd trade him out after that team-specific week just to be on the safe side. I think you'd rather than waiting with bated breath each week and go, right, Darcy's got to get 100 this week, he's versing a shit ruck, or Ridley's going to get 100, he has to get 100, and keep banking on the fact, you may as well just bite the bullet now whilst they've got some decent cash value on them and just move them on, because the more you wait, the more disappointed you are. But because it's so early in the season, you want to get rid of all the shit that's happening elsewhere. So, yeah, I reckon it's a pretty underrated comment. I think, if you see a specific role issue, I think you take the score that they get against that opponent they're going to score well in, and then just move from there and get it over and done with.
Yeah, so at first I thought this is an overrated statement, but now that I've had a second look at it, I'm actually leaning towards it being a 50-50 statement, and I'm basically going to split this into two halves. So one half of the situation is your role gold, your premium players. I think for them, this statement is definitely overrated. I think if you're going around trading out, if you're going around and trading out Sean Darcy this week and you're bringing in, let's say if you're bringing in Brodie Grundy because he's playing West Coast, I think you're just wasting trades basically. So I think for that specific group, it's an overrated statement. For rookies and mid prices, I think this is an underrated statement, because I think when you get to the maximum price, in particular for rookies, I think one thing that a lot of people take into consideration is obviously their break-even score, but I think also it's who they're playing. So therefore, I think this statement for rookies and mid-prices does become very relevant. And I think what most of the people will do is they'll look at this and go, oh, Will Ashcroft's playing Collingwood this week, so maybe I might put Ashcroft on the bench because he's coming up against a really strong midfield. So let's imagine in, say, 6 weeks' time, Will Ashcroft gets to 350, 400k, and you go, oh, Will Ashcroft's still making money. Oh, but he's playing Melbourne this week or Collingwood this week. All right. Then I think the discussion comes around, well, how's Ashcroft going to go in the midfield against a really strong midfield? And is that the right time to go, okay, I don't think he's going to score as well against, this strong midfield being a young kid. So let's move him on and get in a Clayton Oliver, for example.
Yeah.
So,
I see. I just wanted to interrupt you. I see what you mean, and it's a pretty valid statement. I think there's quite a difference between doing this whole situation with a rookie, because regardless of the fact you're going to ship them off later, you're basically wanting to ship them off their highest price points. You're making the best cash grab. Whereas these guys, you brought them in with the intention of keeping them for the long haul. So I guess if you feel that they're going to score a bit dodgily and you're so worried about matchups, and that, say, a Ridley plays the Cats with the Hawkins and Cameron double up and he's not going to score well because of it, I think there's too much, worrying about that. You may as well ship him off straight away. So granted, he might score well against other teams, but you may as well get, cut your losses early and move on from there when there's a plethora of other options that are doing well.
Yeah, so I think if we're just looking at these two specifically, I think with these two, basically, go and look at their break even. If you don't think they can get their break even and you've got no intention of keeping them, then just get rid of them. There's no point them being in your side. Just kick it, just move them on, get in someone who you can trust. I'd probably be doing that with Ridley. I'm still not sold on his role for Ridley. I know he's a third highest scorer for Essendon, but I'm still not sold on his particular role. So I think for Ridley, I think that would definitely be something that I would factor in with him. But I think Darcy at this stage, I don't think it's a consideration. But yeah, that's sort of where I sit with that whole, question. And that's actually a good question, that one. So well done for that one.
Yeah.
So obviously, now that the prices have changed, we obviously had some rookies go up in value. So can you trade in a rookie who's already had one big price jump? So we're obviously talking about, I believe that's Kane Chandler. And forgive me who the one on the left is there. Is that Finn Callaghan?
Yeah, not Finn Callaghan. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't know him, because I didn't know him before the last 2 weeks. But that's, I think, James Buckley.
The defender.
Rookie defender that's just gone from strength to strength, I think.
Yep, he is a defender, Jack Buckley.
Jack Buckley, that's it, from GWS. Yeah. So, trading a rookie who already had one big price jump. We've obviously taken Buckley and Chandler. Buckley, for whatever reason, it wasn't on anyone's radar. I haven't watched GWS games close enough to make an informed decision, but he's gone close to a premium score. He's averaging 91 for a guy that's priced at 205. So you've missed out on obviously a huge price jumping close to 100k. K Chandler's similar. Let me just bring up his scores. So he went obviously 90 on the weekend. Scored 290s and 70s, close to averaging a 90 as well. It's interesting because both, I'd argue that Chandler's the one that Chandler's the one that was a little bit more riskier in the fact that he's a small key forward or pressure forward that you need goals to score, which, yes, granted, he scored 3 of them on the weekend, but everything he touched was so effective. He just scored for fun, realistically. Buckler's an interesting one. I don't know if you've watched enough GWS games to make an informed decision, Nathan, but lower score 78, closer to 2 tons. I mentioned on our weekly write-up in our Patreon that I was a little bit concerned that it was because Hugh Whitfield wasn't there and potentially when he comes back, he'll be affected. But yeah, he just hasn't been that way. And he's, as I said, close to 200s plus a 70, scoring better than most defenders at the moment. What are your thoughts on this? Obviously, Buckley's was priced at 205 instead of 123, so he's now bumped up to 275, whereas Chandler's pretty much bumped up 100k as well to 206. And he doesn't look like slowing down as well and plays West Coast, so he could go quite nicely in that game. What are your thoughts on these two, where, say, you've got a Chester who's done sweet fuck all and you've got money in the bank and you want to just keep riding the wave? Do you get on now or do you go stuff it, we'll skip it because we missed that one big price jump? Granted, there's a price jump coming, like a big one for sure, because I think both of them got negative break evens. Chandler's on negative 42, Buckler's on negative 40. So they got huge jumps left in them. What are your thoughts on that statement? Underrated or overrated?
Look, I'm going to go underrated because I think you can go after 1 week, but only 1 week. If you're going after the second one, I think forget it. And I think if you're doing it after the 1 week, it's basically a correction that you made. So ideally, this would be someone like a Tanner Bruin, who you trade down to Kay Chandler, for example, and you just couldn't get it last week because you'd already used your 2 trades or you'd already used your 3 trades with the boost, and you just couldn't get Chandler in. Normally, you would do this with someone who jumps out of the blue, like a 102k player who just jumps out of the blue with 2 or 3 really big games, and you can still get them for 180k, and it doesn't feel as bad doing it. But I'd be probably avoiding Buckley just on that price alone, even though I will say I have watched a couple of the Giants games this year, and I think he's really benefiting from having a strong backline now at the Giants that sort of has started playing a bit more modern way with their football as opposed to, the old way with Leon Cameron. So he's getting the best forwards on the weekend. And, he got Harry Mackay and he basically kept him quiet. So, I've got big raps for Buckley and how well he's playing at the minute, but I think at that price, I think I'd be avoiding just because I'm not sure if 275k is a good buy for someone who you're going to get rid of in 4 to 6 weeks. And Chandler, I think, is the same thing. I think this would be the last week I would get Chandler. Because you're sort of starting to get into the range of, if you didn't want Oscar Allen because you're worried about him being 200k or however much he was.
Yeah, 100%.
And then you're going, Chandler's the same price, and you're like, no, I've got to get him. Well, it sort of is defeating the purpose of why you didn't pick Oscar Allen in the first place. So, yeah, I think normally I would say don't do it, but I think for 1 week in particular at the start of the year, I think for 1 week you can get away with it, but definitely not the second week. But I think that's only with Chandler. I think Buckley's too much now at 280k. I think there'd probably be better options at his price, to be honest. But he has done very well.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, yeah, no, totally.
Moving on. My segment.
Yeah, I'll leave my camera off for this. You can go nuts.
All right. So this is a segment where I get to blow up, which I often do watching the football. So I've got two segments for this. So the first one is the umpire dissent, and I just want to put it out there that I'm not a biased Collingwood supporter, but obviously being a Collingwood supporter, I don't like to see Carlton win. And what I hate even more is seeing Carlton win by getting a free kick, which at best was 50-50. And the reason why this was at 50-50 was if you watch the footage 10 minutes later in the game, Mitch McGovern is basically doing exactly the same thing for an out of bounds and doesn't get paid. It's about 80 metres out from the Giants' goal, doesn't get paid. And this one umpire has decided to pluck this one free kick in the goal square at a pivotal time in the game. And, you know, this is a multi-million-dollar industry where you've got players' careers, you've got coaches' jobs on the line. And for that umpire to call that dissent, I think just makes an absolute mockery of that rule. The other thing I'll highlight too is your mate down at St Kilda, Jack Higgins, who was flapping his arms around all night appealing for deliberate rush behinds and deliberate out of bounds. There was way more vocal than Stephen Cornelio, and he didn't get pinged once. And all Cornelio did was ask the umpire why it wasn't a free kick, and he's plucked that out at a pivotal time in the game. And let's be honest, I think Carlton have won that game, and I feel like the Giants have been absolutely robbed of the opportunity to get a win in a game which they were well in the hunt for, and I think that free kick basically killed them and took away all their momentum. So to that umpire, I suggest that you have a break for the week, because if you're paying dissent for that, then you're never going to be umpiring in the finals. You're never going to be umpiring on grand final day. And if you don't want to umpire on those 2 days, then you might just as well as give it up and go back to a normal day job. The second one I'm going to go after this week is Andrew Brayshaw. Now, I think all of us had Andrew Brayshaw last week, and we absolutely enjoyed his rise to stardom last year. But for Andrew, I think he has been a victim of this fake football that Fremantle are playing. Now, Andrew, I watched your game on the weekend, and I cannot recall one kick that you had that went forward of about 10 metres from where you were, all right? You've got a great kick on you. Why are you kicking the ball sideways? You're probably Fremantle's most damaging inside midfielder. So what I want to see from you, Andrew, is I want to see that lethal foot that you have hitting players late set inside the 50 metres and getting your owners actually back on your side again. Because at the minute, your owners are going down faster than what Geelong's season is. So seriously, get your kicking boots on and kick the ball forwards, not to the side. All right? And that's my rant for the week.
I think Nathan's going to physically blow up if the Pies lose. The Pies lose this game. He's not coming back on next week. I've never seen someone so riled up with the dissent rule. And I think.
But seriously, what did you? Just while we're on camera, seriously, what did you think of it? Do you think it was a joke?
A joke. I think I blew up. Well, what was it? Not this week's game, but last week's game. I think Steele and who was it?
Yeah, well, that's the other thing too. We should have highlighted.
Pointed at the scoreboard and demanded, not even demanded, basically questioned the umpires. If the umpires are that precious, they may as well go as well under umpire under fives or something.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like, if you're gonna umpire, you want to be umpiring in the finals.
Yeah.
If you're gonna make decisions like that, you're not gonna be anywhere near finals. You'll be piffed out as quick as as quick as what North Melbourne and West Coast were from last year's season. You'll be done.
Oh, 100%, 100%. But just a heads up, I think the reason why Higgins got away with that one, they've got the collar game nice and strong down at St Kilda. Popped the collars up for Hugo, and I'm modelling it as well for the 150th year game. And I think that's what the umpires like, a bit of retro round, and might have nice
Fair enough.
Higgins accordingly. But yeah, that's all we got time for. We've just ticked over the hour mark. I know this one's a little bit longer, but I think it's a fair bit of good discussion to be had with the issues. I think we got this round. This round's a tough one because obviously the first price rises have been set, and it's make or break for a few teams. I think I'm one of them that needs to really start to get going, because I think the problem with my team, and alongside with a few others in my situation, is I'm not too concerned about the rookies that I've got on field. It's more the premiums that are really struggling to fire. But with regards to our Patreon, we're a little bit late with our weekly analysis write-up. We're going to get that done ASAP, probably by tomorrow. It is a lot of work going through each of these games. I mean, we watched all games between the three of us. It's just a lot of work to get it done and sent out in time, with us working full-time as well in the process. So hope you guys understand if we delayed a little bit, just to get it out properly. But yeah, feel free to subscribe to our Patreon. As we said, we really appreciate any subscribers that come our way, whether or not you do the basic or the elite, or the top package is up to you. It's dirt cheap, and it allows us to keep developing this content and pump out new and exciting content for you guys. But other than that, we'll see how we go this week for our Q&A. It really depends on time with the three of us. We hope to get it out, semi-consistently, more so towards the early end of this season, rather than the latter stages when most teams are finalised. Yeah, good luck for this week coming up. I know there's a few good games on Easter Monday as well. Be a cracker with Geelong and Hawthorn. Fingers crossed.
Imagine if Geelong got 0-4.
Yeah, 0-4. That's, I think, the hope for a lot of us. But until then, good luck with your teams, and hope you guys smash it this week.